Inadequacy of the senses. Man overrates his senses. He places too much dependence upon them without justification, for they are not recording all of the phenomena of his surroundings. He likewise trusts them too much without justification, for they are constantly deceiving him. While his senses are recording the stillness and rest of nature on a lazy afternoon, they are failing to record the violent motion of everything in his entire environment, from the blade of grass to the clouds in the heavens above him. Those seemingly motionless clouds are moving at the speed of 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, without the slightest evidence of that swift motion being recorded upon his senses. The earth also is moving many miles per second in two directions, one of rotation upon its axis and the other of revolution around its orbit. His senses register stillness. They are electrically unaware of that motion. This deception is as it should be, just as the same deception in a cinema is as it should be. God's universe is but an electric recording of his knowing, manifested by his thinking. To thus record the ideal of his knowing in the two lights of his thinking, a three-dimensional universe is necessary. If the senses could detect and record all motion instead of but a part of it, the illusion would disappear. The senses would see behind the illusion and find that all motion voids itself. Division of the whole into parts causes the illusion. If the film were removed from the projector of the motion picture, the illusion of motion and change would be voided. That is what creation is, the one light of knowing divided into the pattern parts of thinking. Sensing is but an electric tension set up by the seeming division of one into many which strain to fulfill their desire for oneness. When a unity of condition is consummated, sensation between those parts ceases because the tension ceases. The senses being but tension of desire for unity between divided parts have no existence. The senses are electric flux threads of light, connecting every particle in the universe with every other particle. They are the intercommunicating nerves of the one universal body. When strain of desire for balance, rest, or unity ceases, sensation ceases. In this electric universe, sensation is the strain of resistance to the separation which exists between all separated masses. All matter is one. Separated particles desire to find that oneness. It is part of God's plan that the senses are limited entirely to the recording of a very small fraction of effect. The senses can never sense the whole, but the conscious mind can know the whole. God's words. These words I now say for newly comprehending man of his new cycle. Love ye one another, all men, for ye are one in me. Whatsoever ye do to one in me, ye do to all, for all are one in me. Love thy brother as thyself. Serve thy brother before thyself. Lift high thy brother. Lift him to high pinnacles, for thy brother is thyself. For of a verity I say, love of self or nation of selves turneth neighbor against neighbor, and nation against nation. Self-love breeds hate, and soweth its seed in all the winds to blow wherever it will. Wherefore say I, love of neighbor for neighbor, and nation for nation, uniteth all men as one. Serve first thy brother, hurt first thyself rather than thy neighbor. Gain naught from him unbalanced by thy giving. Protect thou the weak with thy strength, for if thou use thy strength against him, his weakness will prevail against thee, and thy strength will avail thee naught. He who giveth love prospereth mightily, but he who taketh aught gaineth naught. Wherefore lose all to gain the world, gaining naught? He who hath not laid up a treasure in heaven, to equal treasure gained of earth, hath sought the dark. For him the light is far. Now we come to another chapter, man's new cycle. The coming age will mark an epochal advancement in man's evolution toward his goal of omnipotence and omnipotence. Man becomes a higher being with greater power as he acquires knowledge. In knowledge alone lies power. Only through knowledge can man become co-creator with God. Knowledge can be obtained by man only through awareness of the spirit within him. Lack of that awareness is the tragedy of today's civilization. During the last century of the greatest scientific progress in the history of man, great nations of the world have killed, robbed, and enslaved other men to build their own empires. Even today man kills by the millions, condoning his killing as necessary for his self-preservation. He is now but reaping the seed of his sowing. He who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. No man can hurt another man without condemning himself to greater hurt. Fear dominates the world of today. While fear is in the world, love cannot also be. Love can never dominate the world until man ceases to live a primarily sensed existence and knows the light of the Spirit within him. This new age brings man one step nearer to the universe of greater knowing through greater comprehension of man's relationship to man and to God. Each new cycle in the growth of man toward higher levels has been illumined by the few inspired messengers of the light who have known God in themselves. New inspired messengers who know God in themselves will likewise give the light to this new cycle, and these few messengers of the light must multiply into legions, for the need of a spiritual awakening is great. Man's whole reason for being is to gradually pass through his millions of years of physical sensing into his ultimate goal of spiritual knowing. Man has now reached a transition point in his unfolding where he must have that knowing. He can acquire that knowing only through greater awareness of the light of the universal self which centers him as one with God.